Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And what an interesting story this is, and I wonder where it's going to lead. June and her husband Justin have moved to Oregon, and Justin believes it's much more sensible, in order to save money, for them to move in with their mother. The trouble is that every one of his girlfriends, with the exception of one, his mother has almost scared away because she's very dominating and believes nobody is good enough for her precious son. So she is the mother-in-law from hell, potentially. And June is going to have to move in with her and has recently fallen pregnant. So it's very interesting to see where the story is going to lead. So let's continue with part 3 of our story. I stared at Jackie incredulously, as if I couldn't believe the pompous words that had come out of her mouth. She really did consider herself quite the aristocrat, didn't she? Jackie elegantly took a bite of her pad thai, chewing it very slowly as if lost in thought. And then she said, "Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush, because what would be the point of doing that? I was grievously upset that the two of you dashed off to Vegas in the way you did to get married. It was a bitter disappointment to me. A bitter one." Jackie's eyes looked accusingly at me, as if I was the instigator of kidnapping her son and forcing Justin down the aisle to marry me. "Jackie, this was Justin's idea. I thought it was desperately romantic, so I said yes," I tried to assure her. "I'm sure you did, dear. My Justin has always been impulsive. And you knew a good thing when you saw it, didn't you? And it's desperately convenient that you're suddenly pregnant, isn't it? All at the very same time. My bet is you got pregnant, June, before you even went to Vegas. When you told my son about your unfortunate condition, he dutifully whisked you down the aisle at a moment's notice. My son is the perfect chivalrous gentleman. He would never abandon a damsel in distress, or a pregnant woman such as yourself, but do the honourable and right thing by her, because he was raised to be like that. You took full advantage of his good nature, didn't you, dear? Believe me, I know about thrifty girls like yourself." I glared at Jackie furiously. If she wanted to fight, she could have one. I was not going to be a pushover around her. How dare she speak to me like this? "What are you implying, Jackie? That I hoodwinked your son into marrying me because I was pregnant? Is that what you're saying?" I bristled. "Well, yes, I am, as a matter of fact. It's exactly what I'm saying, June. Getting pregnant is the easiest way to snag a man, and everybody knows that. I'm sure you thought all your Christmases had come at once when you met Justin. Let's not kid, my son is quite the catch. He hasn't been short of admirers. And without wishing to sound unkind, June dear, you do rather look like something the cat dragged in. Anyone can see that you're ambitiously desperate to climb the ladder to success. And what better way to accomplish your goals than to marry my son, who will one day inherit a sizable fortune thanks to his father? But then I suspect you know all about that, don't you? You probably did your research on my son. Justin is going to make something of himself one day. I'm very, very proud of him. But I guess you felt like a pig cushioned in clover, didn't you? Successfully seducing him like you did so masterfully. My son always had a soft spot for the half-drowned kitten kind of look." "Mum, that is uncalled for and unacceptable. I'd like to remind you you're talking to my wife. Will you stop it right now? You're being extremely rude towards June. Why do you think we dashed off to get married in the way we did? I didn't want your poisonous, treacherous words destroying my relationship with June, like you've done a plethora of other times with all the other women I've dated over the years. Most of them broke up because of my overbearing, patronising mother. Would you kindly refrain from laying into June like this? She's carrying your grandbaby, for God's sake. Show some respect, Mum." "Respect has to be earned, son. Very difficult it is for me to respect your wife, since I can read her like an open book. and I know exactly what's going on in her head." "Enough, Mum," said Justin, practically growling at his mother. "You're doing this again to June, behaving like you did with all my other girlfriends. You cannot seem to help yourself, can you?" "I'm not sorry I scared some of your ex-girlfriends away. If I could scare them away so easily, as far as I'm concerned, it speaks volumes about their characters, does it not? It shows they were not worth their salt. If someone really loves you, a nasty mother-in-law-to-be isn't going to scare them away very easily. But those young ladies you dated never stood up to me, not one of them did. They were weak and pathetic, crumbled the first time I criticized them. You need to thank me, love, that you didn't end up saddled with one of those flaky women. The only ex-girlfriend of yours I actually liked was Victoria. Now Victoria was rather brazen. She was in your face, and a very, very outspoken young lady who knew her own mind, and I liked that about her. But the moment I liked her, you did not. You went right off her. I thought it was quite ironic, really. You liked her, Mum, because she was high maintenance, very opinionated and snooty, and because her parents were both millionaires. Isn't that the truth? Now, I would really appreciate, Mum, if we could try to get along, because if you are unkind towards June, we'll have to move out. And if you continue in your condescending ways towards her, that's exactly what we will both do." Justin glared furiously at his mother. At least she had the good grace to look down on her plate like a dog that had been unduly scolded for chewing up the sofa. I was grateful that Justin had put his neck out for me, but the trouble was, while his mother was on her best behaviour, while he was around, she was not afraid to be rude towards me when Justin was away from the house, and that was when she would lay into me with her condescending words. I guess she knew that I wasn't going to go blabbing to Justin and say boo-hoo-hoo, "This is what your mother said to me today," like a crybaby. I had to learn to fight my own battles with Jackie, that was for sure. Jackie Bourdain really believed that I had cunningly manipulated Justin into marrying me. She had made that atrociously clear. She was like implying that she was on to me, as if I had duplicitously, with a Machiavellian intent, planned to snag her son and tie him down. "I know your type all too well, June," she snorted. "I've met social climbers like yourself. Girls from the dregs of society, desperate to make something of themselves, climbing out of the dumpster into the palace. I can smell trailer trash from a long way off, you know. Unfortunately, Justin is not very discerning when it comes to women such as yourself. He seems to always pick the needy ones, you know. I know you trapped him into marrying you, but one day he will wake up and smell the coffee and realize what you're really like, and he will see beneath the benign-looking veneer that you show to the world. I'll fix him up with the best divorce attorney money can ever buy. Not that at this stage of your life you can take much from him, because he's not earning big bucks at the moment, but that day will surely come. That's why you married him, June. You knew he was destined to great things. You wanted to enjoy all the convenient perks, didn't you, dear? As for my grandbaby, I want access to him or her after she's born, and after your divorce, because my son will divorce you. It's only a matter of time." "You really think I trapped your son, Jackie, don't you?" I sniggered. "You really are full of yourself, aren't you? Hasn't it occurred to you that me and Justin fell in love with each other? Why is that so hard to believe? Why does everything in your life, Jackie, come down to money and status? It's like you're living in the 1800s, believing everyone should marry into their own class. It doesn't actually work like that these days. It might have done before the war, but not anymore. People these days usually marry for love, even if that's a foreign concept to you that you don't understand, and that you can't comprehend, because maybe love to you is more like a financial agreement than anything emotionally meaningful." "How dare you talk to me like that, June? I'll have you know, me and my late husband married for love." "Really? You do surprise me. I thought you'd be more calculating than that." "I am not calculating, June. I'm judicious and saliently wise. And yes, if you must know, I do think people should marry into their own class. You are beneath my son. You know it. I know it. Furthermore, are you really naive enough to believe women don't marry for money these days? For status and notoriety and fame? You see it all the time, don't you? Young models pursuing wealthy men who are seduced by their looks and marry them because they think everyone's going to look up at them enviously, because they've got a beautiful girl locked onto their arms like a prize trophy. It's pathetic as far as I'm concerned, especially the old ugly men who think the woman married them for love. They genuinely believe that, when it absolutely is not the case. Never mind if the woman herself lacks class and practically comes from an impoverished background herself, and speaks like she's never had a decent education a day in her life. Those men can be so blindly ignorant, as you are indeed too, June, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. But like you, those women turn up their charms to draw in their prey very artfully. And when the time is ripe, the vast majority of them ask for a divorce and run away with a decent sum to set them up for life. I see it all the time, especially in the women marrying older men. It's very common. It's true. I know what you're talking about. I've seen women myself like that, who attach themselves to old men with lots of money. But I'm not like that, Jackie, and I'm extremely affronted you have such a low opinion of me. If you had seen all my last boyfriends, you'd have known that I didn't date any of them for money. Ah, but you didn't marry any of them, did you, June, dear? That speaks volumes. Those boyfriends were only a bit of fun, were they not? But when Justin came along, you knew he was a keeper, did you not? Yes, I did, Jackie, actually. I did think I'd hit the jackpot when I met your son, because he was good-looking, charming, clever, funny, kind, adventurous, and so much more. And I may remind you, he doesn't have money at the moment, and I didn't even know he came from a wealthy background until I came here and met you, because he kept all that from me. I don't believe that for a second, June. I'm not stupid. I don't buy your story. Besides, even if you didn't know he came from a wealthy background, you must have known that Justin was going places. That was blindingly obvious in every sense of the word. Well, I knew he was ambitious, June, and I did believe he'd be successful one day. But no, that's not why I married him. You are thinking like you probably thought when you married your husband. But I don't think like you. We aren't all ambitious social climbers, you know. You've got some brazen audacity, haven't you, June, talking to me like this? What is wrong with you? Have you no respect for your elders? Look, Jackie, since I've moved into your beautiful home, you haven't made me feel remotely welcome here. You are angry with me for marrying your son. You believe I deliberately fell pregnant with his baby. You cannot bear it that your son didn't trust you not to ruin his relationship with me, so he discluded you from our wedding. And I bet that cut you up. That's why he was so eager to get married in Vegas. I understand now. You did this to yourself. You sabotaged all his relationships with women. I'll tell you something about my parents. Over the years, I've brought boyfriends back home to meet them that have ruffled up their feathers. But do you know what, Jackie? If I'd married one of those men, my parents would have had my back all the way. They may not think I'd made the right choice in whom I chose to marry, but they would refuse to interfere in the way you do with me and Justin's relationship. You can't resist putting your nose where it's not wanted, Jackie. And if Justin was to choose between me and you, there's no contest as to who he would choose. How dare you speak to me like that, young lady? Let's just say if Jackie and I had been of the canine species, we'd have possibly had a dog fight together and gone for each other's jugulars until we'd drawn blood. Or if we'd been feline, the claws and the gnashes would invariably have come out. But as we were two women, we used words as our daggers without employing physical defences to our advantage. I was determined to fight fire with a water hose to put it out, which is exactly what I did with Jackie Bourdain. I refused to be intimidated and patronised by this cantankerously disagreeable, petulant woman, and I was not remotely afraid to give her my opinion. I knew, of course, that some of Dustin's other girlfriends had shrunk back into their shells, but that was not going to be me or my story. I loved Justin, and I was going to fight tooth and nail for the success of our marriage. And if it meant giving his mother a hard time, that is exactly what I would do. I realized all my life I had been the quintessential people-pleaser. I had hated causing anyone offence of any kind. But Jackie Bourdain was helping me to remove that people-pleasing veneer, and to say exactly what was on my mind. And this was very liberating, and made me feel oddly accomplished and confident. I could see slowly but surely, standing up for myself was giving Jackie Bourdain pause for thought, and a run for her money. "I feel sorry for you, Jackie," I said, "living in this big, grand house, with these exquisite ocean-front views, being pampered within an inch of your life, and having everybody waiting on you, and falsely believing you're above everyone else. In reality, you're the one that's more impoverished than the rest of us. You're so luxuriously cocooned in your delusional, opulent world. You're missing out on so much, and you don't even realize it. I think rich people such as yourself always believe that everything revolves around money, and that you can't be happy without it. But guess what, Jackie? Some of the poorest communities around the world are the happiest of them all. It's the little things that count, Jackie. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that at all. You think you're above all the things normal people do, but you're seriously missing out. You think cooking is a chore, when it can be great fun. You think dining at luxurious restaurants is the only way to enjoy yourself, knocking back a bottle of very expensive wine or champagne, and dining out on Michelin star food. But believe it or not, Jackie, it can be just as fun buying a hot dog and walking down the promenade of the beach and laughing like mad when a seagull snatches it away from you. I bet you've never bought street food in Thailand before from a street vendor, or shopped in a bazaar to find a bargain for yourself, because you like to shop in all those overrated designer boutiques. You're scared of ruining your hair or damaging your perfect manicure. But you'll be surprised to learn that the only one that really cares about ruining your image is yourself, because most people don't really care all that much about it. They're too busy living their own lives to worry about how pretentious yours actually is. We live in a rather delusional, self-centered world, Jackie, where some of us get off on showing off. It makes us feel better about our sorry lives. Is that what you're doing with yours, Jackie? Showing off to people to make them envious of you? I know it's popular, for example, for some young people to glamorously post up pictures on Instagram so that they can show off in their lives. It's a bit like a kid saying, "My donut is bigger than yours, and I've got more jam inside mine." "You don't know what you're talking about, June," Jackie had protested, but I'd seen a wistful but rather ambiguous look in her eyes that made me wonder if my words had finally sunk in. The next day, to my astonishment, I observed Jackie swooning around her kitchen. She was watching her Filipino cook cooking and asking for some helpful tips. "So tell me, why do you use lemongrass and ginger in this dish?" she was asking. I have to say the Filipino cook was completely gobsmacked that Jackie was showing a personal interest in Thai cooking and asking her all these questions about how to do this and how to do that. At one point I saw Jackie making a sauce with the cook, and against all the odds, appeared to be having the kind of fun her pretentious life so desperately lacked. Could I dare to believe that Jackie Bourdain had turned a corner, and that she was beginning to realize that her cushioned, pampered life meant that she was missing out on all the simple things, which in my opinion are what really make life meaningful? Was she finally getting it? It would seem so. It was early on in my pregnancy, but I was beginning to experience a few very profound changes. I will say I had suddenly had a strong aversion to all products that contained caffeine. Previously I couldn't get along with my day without any caffeine. Every morning I would rise up early, before the dawn even broke, to do my yoga exercises out on the beach, when it was still dark. Jackie lived in such a beautiful home, but it was that long stretch of beach that had truly won over my heart. The views over the water were absolutely sensational. I could easily imagine Justin when he was a little boy, sitting down on the beach with his bucket and spade, building wistful sand castles in the sand. It was such a pity he'd never grown up to know his father. But his dad had tragically died when he was only 8 years old, when he'd chartered a small flight with his company, and the plane had come down in bad weather, and no one had survived the tragic accident. So in some ways I guess I should have had some sympathy for Jackie, but I'm afraid I did not. Jackie's account. I was devastated to learn my son Justin had chosen to get married on a whim in Vegas, of all places. In one of those tacky wedding chapels, of all things. I mean, how tasteless can you get? Would you believe he proposed to his girlfriend June while she was on a roller coaster ride, of all things, at a fairground? I mean, who does that? I would have hoped my son would have done something infinitely more stylish and very romantic, like taking his girlfriend to Paris and proposing to her up the Eiffel Tower, or on a gondola in Venice. But no, Justin takes his girlfriend to a mediocre fair of some kind and pops the question there, in front of people who have a mouth stuffed with cotton candy, and children with dirty fingers from sucking toffee apples, crying out to go on some kind of ride like a Ferris wheel or God knows what else. Of course, one of my girlfriends, Verity, thought it was all so dreadfully romantic that my son had whisked June off to Vegas, where they stayed at the Bellagio. But that woman practically lives in a permanent dream state. In her ideal world, everything would be made of gingerbread, and melted chocolate, of course. If the truth be told, much as I hate to say this, when it comes to my son Justin, I sometimes don't know what makes him tick. He can do the most incongruously bizarre things at times, and be so damn impulsive like his father was. That's the problem that I've tried to curb with him over the years. But the spirited stallion within him refuses to be restrained. He's a chip off the old block, that's for sure. My late husband Buzzard was like that, hence his name, always flying awkwardly into situations without thinking first about what he's doing. My son, Justin, is not what I would describe as worldly wise. Not yet, I must say. Hopefully he will change in the years to come. I mean, when I think about all the disastrous girls he used to bring home to meet me over the years, well, there are no words. It seems that he was attracted to the very needy types, something I could never understand. The women he would bring home were always shy, introverted, unsophisticated, callow, too frightened to say boo to a goose. He was always like that as a young boy, you know, rescuing everything in sight, as if it was his mission in life to be some kind of a hero. I do recall he refused to speak to me once, because I'd stood on one of those awful cockroaches. Now those things are disgusting, they really are. He was furious with me, indignantly angry, and told me in no uncertain terms that even ugly things deserve to live, and that I was a murderer. You killed it, Mummy! I hate you! I hate you! How could you do that? For years he dreamed of becoming a firefighter, you know. And as a child his favourite toy was a bright red fire truck with all these model firefighters, of which he claimed to be one of. When I'm big, Mummy, I'm going to rescue people from burning buildings, he would tell me. I began to worry, when even in his late teens he still wanted to become a firefighter. Luckily, I artfully persuaded him, as he got ever older, that he needed to go to university. And for once in his life, my bloody-minded son actually listened to me. After a while, he abandoned the idea of joining the fire brigade, so I breathed a little easier at night, I have to say. I remember once he rescued a seagull with a broken wing. We took the damn thing to the vet. It cost an absolute fortune to get that seagull flying again. We kept the thing in our home, and it pooped all over the place and had a penchant for choosing the whitest sofa in my house to deposit the contents of his guts all over. I had no idea one bird could be capable of producing a factory of poop like this thing did. When I learnt they were actually using bird poop for face masks to rejuvenate the skin, I could have made a thriving business out of the bird's feces, let me tell you. I will, however, say the seagull Justin called Squirt never ever forgot him, you know. When he set that damn bird free, it would always fly over to greet him,
when he was on the beach again. Justin would never forget to bring his favourite friend fish and chips as a snack. That hungry bird rarely appreciated the tasty morsels my son would bring him. He was very close to that bird, I'll have you know. The only girl he brought home to meet me that was halfway decent was Victoria Morris. Now that girl was a delight. If he'd married her, I would have been very happy indeed. She had style and class, and a very strong personality. She came from a decent background, and went to Harvard. But I think when Justin realized that I approved of his girlfriend, he completely went off her, as if in some way she had become contaminated just because I liked her. My son believes I deliberately set out to sabotage all his relationships with women, and he didn't want me to ruin what he had with June Gregor. I mean, the idea is absolutely ludicrous. For all these years, all I've ever done is had Justin's interests at heart. I give him an honest opinion on the woman he dates because I want him to choose wisely when it comes to selecting a long-term life partner. He, of course, thinks I'm a meddling, interfering busybody. Maybe I am to a certain extent, but I really only have his best interests at heart. My friends tell me in no uncertain terms that Justin is absolutely right, that I'm far too possessive over him, and that no one would ever be good enough for him. They say I'm playing a dangerous game, because my son could turn against me one day, especially if I upset this new wife of his. But what do they know? Many of my friends are now on their second marriage. When Justin asked if he could move in with me, I was so delighted, because having my son back home is a dream come true, although I wish to God he wasn't bringing his pregnant wife back home with him. It would mean I would be saddled with that annoying woman all day long, and I was not remotely enamoured with the idea. When I told my girlfriends that June was pregnant, they oohed and ahed and said how wonderful it was that I was going to be a grandmother. They all falsely assume that my life is a bed of roses. How far from the truth that is. Maybe I give them that impression, but it's so far from reality. I mean, I live in such a large, very sophisticated modern home. But with just me and my Filipino cook come cleaning lady for company, it can get desperately lonely at times. Sometimes the house seems to swallow me up, it's just so large. Yet I've never wanted to downsize, because I adore my oceanfront views, and that's the reason I stay in my home. Ostensibly, nothing is better than looking out at the ocean every day, or taking a casual stroll down the beach. I have sometimes considered getting a dog for company, but then I just think of all the time it's going to demand from me. And I mean, what if it pees over the sofa? That's something I couldn't abide. Then, of course, it's going to need treatments at a pooch parlour, regular strolls on the beach, and then acquiring a dog sitter to take care of it if I was to go away on a Caribbean cruise or something with one of my girlfriends. It's too much like hard work and responsibility. What if the thing turns out to be like Squidge the seagull, lifting its leg over everything? My friend Verity, the one with her head in the clouds, has got a sausage dog, and it still isn't house-trained yet. And the last time I went to visit her, the house smelt of urine. It was just too dreadful. The moment I laid eyes on my son's wife, June Gregor, my first impression was she wasn't as sweet as she looked on the outside. That innocent, whimsical look she projected didn't fool me for a single second. That artfully guileful woman certainly has no clue how to dress. I suspect she buys all her clothes from a thrift shop. I seriously doubt she's ever worn anything designer in her entire life. Dowdy is the word I would use to describe her. A complete lack of style. For the life of me, I cannot comprehend why my son finds her so attractive. She's pretty ordinary, if you ask me. Very mousy brown hair and brown mud-coloured eyes. Let's just say, without wishing to be unkind, a few highlights in her hair wouldn't go amiss. They could transform her, let me tell you. A makeover also might work wonders on her. But if you're dowdy, what's the point of changing your look? Without wishing to sound unkind, I don't think June's worn makeup a single day in her life. She's very unsophisticated. When I saw her, I knew she duped my son rather artfully into marrying her. She probably announced she was pregnant. And what did my chivalrous son do? The right thing by her, of course, and whisked her off to Vegas to get married, in some mediocre run-of-the-mill wedding chapel there. Well, at least my son stayed at the Bellagio. But honestly, getting married on a whim like this was absolutely ridiculous and nonsensical as far as I'm concerned. When he phoned me to tell me the horrifying news, well, let's just say I wanted to slap him across the face. I was so mad. Still, I think in time he may come to his senses and realize that June Gregor is nothing but an ambitious gold digger looking for a man to feather her nest for her with plenty of grandeur. She obviously knew someone like my son was going places. Justin fails to see what I'm so clearly seeing, as clear as day, almost as if I'm looking through a translucent pane of glass. But as far as he's concerned, June is the most beautiful thing he's ever seen in his life. When I first met June Gregor, I thought to myself, here we go again. Another girl with a broken wing who needed fixing, which is exactly why my hopelessly romantic son had fallen for her hook, line and sinker, like he always does with helpless women who need to be rescued in some way. My son is incorrigible like that. He's got the soppiest heart that I've ever seen. I tried to harden him over the years, make him a wee bit more cynical about the world, but no such luck. Justin always sees the very best in people. Like so many of Justin's previous girlfriends, June was typically reticent and bashful. I thought to myself, this is another one, just like all the others, a cardboard cutout of all of Justin's previous girlfriends. Only this time he's only gone and married the woman. When I started giving June a piece of my mind, preferably when Justin wasn't around to defend his wife's character, I was rather startled when the woman began to stand up for herself. Now, I wasn't expecting that at all. I was clandestinely secretly impressed by her balls, for none of Justin's girlfriends have ever dared to stand up to me, but have usually shrunk away into the shadows and usually disappeared from Justin's life as a consequence. June didn't hesitate to spit out her venom at me, and some of the things she said weren't exactly easy to hear. She began to tell me how shallow and miserable my life was. She was telling me I was consumed by my social and public image, and was spoilt, entitled, and self-centered. She told me I was used to people doing things for me, so much so that my life was lacking in fullness, that you get from the little things. She was telling me that money didn't buy you happiness, and it was life's little pleasures that make us joyful, like enjoying a hot dog down the Broadwalk. And do you know what? I cannot actually remember the last time I ever did something like that. I've never tasted street food in Thailand, or bought clothes from a cheap bazaar, or bartered for a bargain. And I guess what I realized was that June was right about me. Maybe I was missing out, and I didn't even realize it. So I have decided to make some significant changes in my own life, to make it a little bit more rich. The other day I surprised my Filipino cook when I asked her to teach me how to make pad thai. That woman is married to a Thai man, so she knows all about Thai cooking. I thought she was going to faint when I asked her to teach me. She looked as if she was going to pass out from the mere shock of it all. But in the end, she seemed to thoroughly enjoy teaching me how to cook. And in a strange way, I think we bonded over the activity we shared together. I will say this. When I'd finished cooking the dish, I knew so much more about my Filipino maid. And I also felt so accomplished. I can't remember having so much fun in such a long time. I'll make sure the next time I take a walk along the beach, I'll stop off and buy myself a hot dog. And maybe I'll even pick up a dog from the shelter to walk along the beach. Maybe June has helped me to reevaluate my life after all. But I'd never tell her that. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing that. When June said I was a social climber, and only cared about my public image and hanging around in the right social circles with affluent friends, that was not easy to hear, because I've never really considered myself a snob. But maybe I am. And she's probably right. I do care about my image far too much. And for what, I don't really know. She said something that really put the knife in, I have to say. That everybody was so caught up in their own lives to be worried about little old me. She went on to say everyone with any sense knew that all this fancy stuff people regularly put up on their Instagram posts was all for show. Personally, I've never done anything like that. I've never believed in airing my dirty laundry for all to see, even if the laundry in question is scrupulously clean, without a stain or blemish in sight, and is drying on a deck of a fabulous cruise liner, somewhere luxuriously exotic. I just would never do that. Let's just say, if I'm being ruthlessly honest, doing that in my opinion, well, there are no words. It's dreadfully vulgar, is it not? I'm not from that showy generation that hangs out the details of my life like that. But I do understand what June is saying with all this. I was looking at Verity's 22-year-old daughter's Instagram posts, for example, when June put the idea into my head. I just suppose I was a little bit curious. Now, I couldn't believe how showy her images were. Rosalind had airbrushed pictures of herself, looking as if she was 100 pounds lighter on a cruise liner somewhere. And her fat face had suddenly miraculously developed cheekbones that I do not believe exist on her at all, nor have they ever existed on that face of hers. Then there was all the bragging that went along with the images that she presented in those posts. Oh my God! This restaurant was brill! It was actually Michelin star! This is what I ate! Check out my pictures and everything I ate! Let me tell you, the foie gras was to die for. Look at me now! I'm in Milan! Rained all day! I ate at the finest Italian restaurant in Italy. Check out the squid ink pasta I ate with truffle sauce. Oh my God! Never eaten anything so good in my entire life! The pasta was perfectly al dente. Then there were the responses from the posts. You look gorgeous. Love the black pasta. How can you eat so much and be so thin? I'm so jealous. June was saying all these Instagram posts are but showy stuff designed to make other people feel inadequate about themselves and their own lives when they compare themselves to these so-called fashionable images projected to us by social media influencers that are far from real. The truth is that these influencers post these things because sometimes, I hate to say this, but there's a huge void in their own lives that desperately needs to be filled, and that their real lives are a lot less colourful than they present to the world. Not that I'm a fine one to talk, of course, because I employ image a lot in my own life. Probably because my own life has been pretty meaningless up to now. Which, of course, June is quick to point out to me. Maybe I'm being vulgar, in a less obvious way, if you know what I mean. I know I'm harping on about this a lot, but it's come to my attention that image matters to us a lot. What people think of us is always very important. I could see, for example, that in many of Rosalind's Instagram posts, airbrushing had been ruthlessly performed to make things infinitely more glossy than they really are. Having said that, if I'm being truly honest with myself, if I had a photograph of myself with big fat ugly black circles under my eyes, and if I looked 50 pounds heavier, wouldn't I be sorely tempted to adjust the images to make myself more glamorous? I would if I could, I suppose. I must not be so quick to judge and condemn. When June said all this to me, I realised she wasn't as ditzy and airheaded as I thought she was. And maybe, just maybe, she was not such a pushover after all. Don't get any ideas. That does not mean for a single moment I'm warming to my daughter-in-law. I wouldn't go that far. I still say that my son Justin could have done a whole lot better than marrying June. But my friends keep pointing out to me that in my biased opinion, no one would ever be good enough for him. And that's probably true too. I will say that I've never seen him look so deliriously happy before. He is hopelessly in love with June, and excited about becoming a father soon. I hate seeing June making him so happy. I guess it does make me awfully jealous. I've always been the only woman in my son's life, you see. I know if my son had to choose between me and June, He would take his wife's side every single time. And that is hard for me to have to accept and to take on board. Justin has always been my entire world. I raised my son, changed his diapers, took care of his every need, and now I know I'm the second most important person in his life. I'm no longer his number one. And yes, that bothers me awfully. I wonder if other mothers feel like I do about their sons. The trouble is no one wants to admit their true, authentic feelings, because it wouldn't be socially acceptable, would it? Maybe this is one of the underlying reasons I have mercilessly tried to sabotage Justin's former relationships with other women in the past. With a huge measure of success, I might add. I tell myself it's because these girls are not good enough for him. But I suspect the truth is that when push comes to shove, in reality, I'm furiously jealous of anyone who steals my son's attention away from me. I told June that when Justin saw through her, he'd dump her like a hot potato and demand a divorce. I lied, of course. I know Justin is as loyal as a goose is. And let me tell you one thing about geese. Those birds stay faithful all their lives, rarely ever partner up with another bird, even after their partner has died. My son is one of those extremely loyal, devoted men. My husband was devoted to me like that when he was alive. He loved me warts and all, and believe me, there were many of those. Even though he described me as the most impossible, difficult woman he ever had the pleasure to meet. But he enjoyed the challenges of being married to me, because I kept him on my toes. So there we are. That is the end of part 3. Part 4 is where all the Bigfoot encounters begin to take place. So I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.